don't know if y'all went up and seen their stuff. They got some really nice stuff and pictures up there, and they're gonna talk about your story and tell you about it.
Okay.
Thank you for coming and doing this for us.
No, I'm kind of glad to. Probably a lot of people don't know a lot of the inner workings of what went on down there all those years. So we'll give it a go here. I'm going to ask Denny to jump in now and then if I flub up or miss something, or maybe he'll elaborate on something else. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hello everybody here at the Path Valley Society. It's very nice to be asked here to do this. Some of you I know, some I never saw before tonight, but that's okay. There was a bunch of us, well, I'll give you a little history on things. Denny and I worked there most of our lives. The owners of RBL, Rosenberry Brothers Lumber Company, a lot of people called it the mill or the sawmill. They came from a family of 10 children. They were kind of the middle children, the boys. They were born in Freestone, which is now Upper Horse Valley. Was a post office there at one time. They were born on a farm that a lot of kids, and wasn't a lot of work there, but not much profit probably. It was more or less survival. Glenn was born in 1920, and my dad Leonard was born in 1922, and Guy was born in 26. So when the Depression hit, 1929, they were 9, 7, and 3. So they grew up in probably the worst times of this country, maybe. And they probably struggled. There wasn't money for toys, bicycles. I don't think, none of them ever had a bicycle that I know of. There just wasn't any money. They farmed with horses and a lot of hand labor, loaded hay, maybe, I guess it had a horse pulling scythe build, and that's how you would lay a hayfield down. But then a lot of that hay was thrown onto a wagon by hand, I think. So that's the kind of work they were into when they were young. They grew up, I'm missing something here. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Nobody was in the lumber business at that time?
My granddad hauled ties, like 10, or was it only 5? There was a sawmill in Horse Valley. Granddad hauled 5 or 10 ties over the Carrick, or over to Richmond. Was there another road over to Richmond in the upper end of the valley?
I didn't think so.
Anyway, and he was a mail carrier from Freestone to wherever the mail went. And I guess that was a few bucks. And of course the older children helped raise the younger children. Grandma must have had kids for what, 20 years? And then to feed this pack yet, I can only imagine these, anyway, I don't know how she did it really. Glenn said one time, and during the Depression years, nobody had 50 cents to buy a young, healthy pig. Just, you had pigs, you couldn't sell them. Nobody could pay you for one. So, as teenagers, they grew. My dad, when he was young, a sawmill paid him, I think he said 5 cents or 10 a day to go over to the sawmill at 4 or 5 in the morning and make fire in the boiler. So when the workers came at 7, the steam was up and the mill was ready to run. You know, 5 or 10 cents back then must have been like 50 bucks now. I don't know. Mind-boggling. So there was some work. They lived out of the mountain there. They split chestnut rails there was demand. Farmers used split rails, I think, locust posts, orchard props. Some of them went over to pick apples. They'd walk every day from Horse Valley to Edenville, pick peaches or pears or whatever, and walk back in the evening. Pretty good hike, but they had to do whatever. So they also cut white oak billets for barrel staves. Back in those days, there wasn't plastic. Metal drums were maybe somewhat rare. Everything came in a barrel, keg of nails, everything. So there was a market for white oak barrel staves. The family had a few, maybe sheep, chickens, regular farm type animals. I don't think they raised much for meat, like a beef or anything. They had a couple milk cows for their own use. And they ate out of the mountain. Deer and turkey were scarce. Deer were not plentiful in the 20s and 30s. They ate squirrel, grouse. They fished in the creek, gigged frogs and eels, and they were great marksmen. The shells were expensive. If you pulled the trigger, you better have something laying out there to eat. That was the plan. One of them said raccoon was a little bit greasy to eat. So they trapped coons and skunks, foxes for the hides, and sold that for shoes and clothes money. Okay, let's see, I'm missing something here. Jump the page. Okay.
Well, he told us about the number 5 skunk.
Yeah, go ahead, Denny. I'll get
Number
my
5 skunk, they could get $5. So the guy would come up through Horse Valley and collect hides. And they'd come back. But the number 5, I said, oh, did that have the nice big white stripe up the back? They said, no, it had virtually no stripe. That was a number 5. So you didn't get too many number 5s. Wow. And they had to skin it, put it on a stretcher, have the hide dried. And then if they got a number 5, they could get $5. I don't know what they got for the other ones, probably 50 cents or $1. That was big money back then. Good money.
Okay, so this went on, that was our early teens, around 1932, 35. They got to Chambersburg once in a while, which was a big deal, you know. They saw some people, even during the Depression, the term was they had some jingle in their pocket. Had a couple silver dollars, maybe it rattled around in there. Our dads didn't have much to do that with, so I think at that point it made them motivated. Someday they thought whatever it took, work, smarts, they were going to have some jingle in their pocket. So they did their best with what they had to work with until 1941. Of course, Japan decided they didn't like us anymore, and World War II happened. So all 3 boys were drafted into World War II. Glenn went in October of 42, and my dad went in September of 42, and Pete was youngest. He was drafted in 1944. And I'll run through this a little bit. I know this, we ain't sawmilling yet, but I want to give you a little background of what made these guys what they were.
That's the important thing.
44, they all went in during World War II. They all came home, or we wouldn't be here giving you a little chat tonight. Glenn served until September of 43. He got out on a medical discharge. I don't know the whole story on that, but they left him come home after a year. Leonard, my father, he was in an anti-aircraft artillery training. He was with the 5th Army Battalion. He was with a 90mm gun crew, and they fought and shelled the Germans across North Africa. They landed somewhere, Morocco over here, and chased the Germans down around the eastern shore of North Africa, Tunisia, Libya, some of the Sahara Desert. So they got down here about, let's say 4 o'clock or whatever on the side of North Africa. They invaded Sicily, which was full of Germans. So they soldiered on, got the Germans run out of Sicily. Then they went over to Italy and started clear up through the whole country of Italy. Palermo, Rome, you name it. Now that's, he was in combat 3.5 years, 18 months, one time, no breaks. That's yanking the thing on that gun and loading them shells. That would be tough, I would think. But he endured, and so while he was over there doing that, Denny's dad, whose given name is C. Guy Rosenberry, Calvin Guy. A lot of folks called him Guy, and a lot of us called him Pete. Pete or Peter. I don't know where he got that nickname. A lot of people say, well, who's Peter? Well, that's Guy. Same guy.
My grandfather nicknamed all the boys.
Oh, the granddad name, I didn't know that. Looky there, I'm learning something.
Good thing you came tonight.
Yeah. Denny, do you want to, I'll run through a little bit of what I know about your dad, and you fill in whatever I miss. Pete, of course, went basic training, Camp Blanding in Florida. I remember him talking about that. And so his unit, he was infantry. He got shipped to Hawaii in '44. They were training and loaded up, ready to attack Japan, or same as Normandy, only this was going to be on mainland Japan. Estimated 1 million soldiers would be killed. Japan was not giving up. They would not quit until the bomb dropped, 2 bombs. Then that sort of changed things. Probably saved his dad's life, because he said, you know what, anyway. So they just trained and kept their equipment good, waiting for the order to load up the ships and whoop, into Japan. So I'll let Denny take it there for a little while, and if you want to.
They loaded the ships, and the whole big battle fleet sailed for Japan. And he said, word came that Japan surrendered. Then I said, what do you think we did? He said, we sailed straight on to Japan under the same orders. And he said, we dropped anchor off the shore of Japan. He unloaded all of us GIs and marched us up across the beach, and not a shot fired. And he said they moved us into a barracks on Japan. And he said, that's where I stayed for the next year. He said, we occupied Japan. He said, you don't hear about it.
Didn't they take them a bus ride or something, or took them past where the bomb went?
There was a train.
Near
so
there.
They put them on a train, and their provisions didn't keep up with them. And he said we were on that train, I think, for 2 days, no food and very little water. They said they took us up across Japan, and they said everything was flat. They said then we came past where the bomb hit, and they said it was just devastating. He said everything in Japan was flat, even though where the atomic bomb didn't hit. He said the Japanese were cutting all the metal off the guardrails along the sides of the bridges. He said everything was gone for the war effort. And he said the cities were all burned up, and they're the second largest city in Japan. He said they convoyed through there, and he said there was only one traffic light left. The second largest city, I think, Honshu or something like that. He said if it wouldn't have been for the atomic bomb, you wouldn't be here, my boy.
And I got 2 things I'll jump in here. I heard Pete say one time, we trained for years, gonna invade Japan, and we landed, started spreading out. He said, "What's the first thing you think I had to guard?" Everybody said, "Well, I don't know, the beer." He said, "We unloaded tons of beer, and I had to guard this fenced-in area where all the beer was, because soldiers like beer, you know. And, well, can't have none now. We got work to do." But anyway, and one other thing, Denny and his dad, Paul Tibbets, flew Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the first bomb on Japan.
Wow.
Denny and his father got to meet that man before he died, got a book signed by him, and one of you guys said, "You know, you saved my life or my dad's life." I don't know what quite the conversation was.
Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff. So, okay. All right, so Japan surrendered, and yep, okay. So now we're in 1946. These three guys, the two that served to the end of the war, and they came home sick of war, tired of being told every move to make, and they were ready to get on with their lives. And the military does motivate you. They sharpen you up. You're ready for anything, really. And these guys were pretty strong boys to start with, and they probably only got a little stronger in there doing all that good stuff. So Glenn had gotten out earlier, and he was running a small sawmill in Horse Valley in 1945. So he had a little jump on the other two. My dad and Pete got into the paperwood business. So you see loads of stuff going all the time. Some of it's this big around, some of it's less than 6 inches. The smaller stuff is paperwood. It's usually long length. Back in the 40s and 50s, they would only buy 5-foot length. And there was no machinery, a chainsaw. So my dad worked independent, and so did his dad. They each bought a truck, and about every day they would load 5, well, maybe not every day by themselves. These little trucks, they were little dual-wheel trucks, more or less a glorified livestock truck, a little single-axle V-tag, they called them. Maybe hauled 5 ton, I would think, would be it. And they loaded, of course, the paperwood is laying down. Logging companies back then only took the best of the log. They took down to maybe this big or maybe this big, cut it off, and they left the tops all lay. And then my dad and his dad, they'd say, "What are you gonna, can we have those tops?" So yeah, take them. So it was free, but they had to saw them up 5-foot length and carry it on their back over to what I call a mountain truck. There was no timber jacks and all this fancy equipment. And what they did was buy an old Army ambulance at salvage, take the ambulance part off, or an Army duck, those ones that go in the water, cut the boat body off, shorten the frame or whatever, move the winch from the front to the back, and they would construct a wood-carrying vehicle, 4-wheel drive, gas motor, make whatever. Old Mr. Hutchison lived right over near your cabin, up on top of the Forge Hill. He welded and cut, and I'd hate to see the pile of welding rods that man run through to make stuff for our dads, but we were over there a lot, getting stuff fixed or fabricated. So that's what they worked with, and they loaded this wood by hand. You know, don't take too big a hunk of wood to weigh close to 100 pounds or 80 pounds. So stick by stick, they carried it from here to your cars, flicked it on the truck, come back, another stick. Drove that off-road vehicle out to the main road and unloaded it by hand again on their road truck. And then, when they worked by themselves, got in at about midnight, drove to York, and unloaded it by hand down there. So they handled the same 5-6 ton 3 times before they got any money coming. That's what they did. And then a couple years, and then about, when did I say, Johnny, 57? Where I got it here. Elaborate, yeah, I elaborated, all right, okay. Folks used to say, why do you guys work so hard in this dangerous, terribly physical work? And my dad's favorite phrase was, this ain't nothing, nobody's shooting at you. So, after they decided they could make more money if those two stayed in the woods and kept the truck loaded and hired a driver to unload it. They had 2 trucks, so my dad and Pete worked together about 1957, and they bought some jobs, paperwood jobs, and Letterkenny would put out timber contracts, even back there in the 50s, and Dad and Peter were cutting paperwood over there, and at that time, Letterkenny was using up some surplus ammo. They would fire them 90mm guns into the mountain like they do now, but not quite as safely. I don't know where they shot, but so Dad and Pete were out here on their acres that they were supposed to work in, and
Oh my gosh.
this shell fragment went flying out through the trees above their heads. Believe me, Dad knew what shrapnel sounded like going past, and they went into the provost marshal's, the big shot that runs Letterkenny, and said, something wrong, man, we're out here in this zone and shell fragments are flying out through the trees. Oh, that's an impossibility. No, we're shooting over here into the mountain, can't be. They didn't believe them. So a couple days went by, maybe a week or 2. Same thing happened. Only this time, a big smoking hot piece of, I don't know if you ever saw a shell fragment, it's just a jagged piece of heavy steel. Well, it landed here and smoking in the leaves. So Pete or Dad grabbed a glove or whatever, got a hold of this, throwed it in their old Jeep, into the big shot's office. What do you call that? Where'd you get the, well, that flew about 10 feet from us. Now you tell me that shrapnel can't come out through there. That's one little adventure of theirs. So anyway, I thought of that this morning when I was rewriting this. I gotta get my glasses on. Somebody ain't writing very good here. Okay. Together, yep, loaded their trucks, driver hauled them. Okay. About 1957, their backs were starting to give them problems, loading tons and tons of stuff every week. So they decided to get into sawmilling, which was slightly easier. And Glenn sold my dad 100 acres in Amberson off of Store Lane, a nice little piece of property with timber on it. So they bought a stick mill. I don't know if it was new or used.
Probably new.
And
Brick mill from Waynesville.
they moved it up there, and back then, I don't want to get ahead of myself here again. I'm describing something here. Yeah, I'll get to that. So they started a sawmill in Amberson. Denny and I loved going to the sawmill with our dads. Most kids could not go with their dad to work. That just didn't happen. Well, they took us, and I guess the few years we were more in the way than any good, but they were nice men. They didn't club us around or anything, and boys will be boys, you know. Now and then we needed straightened up a little bit, but anyway, here was this giant sawdust pile, you know. Every kid likes a sand pile. Well, here's something 30 feet high. We took our trucks and played in the mud and whatever, you know, it was fun. Learned to shoot guns, shot hornets' nests, and you name it. So it was good years, really. So sometimes we were in the way, but they had enough patience to give us some tasks that we could do. Swung on grapevines, mud, yeah.
We handled a lot of slabs, Joe.
Huh?
We handled a lot of slabs.
The light stuff, yeah. Oh, here's a good one. You know, now you got your little kid or grandkid, and you're out at a picnic and the little gnats are just eating you up. Well, they have DEET and all these aerosol sprays. Well, guess what we got? And we're little tender-faced boys standing there, you know, and they were just eating us up. The old man would come over there, man, these bugs, Dad, I can't see, you know, in your eye. And they had pretty big rough hands. They'd dip her in the diesel fuel and give you a big swat across the forehead. Maybe dump a little on your hat and smear it around the nab head. There, that'll slow them up a little. So that was our, it worked, but sort of we all ain't got skin cancer or something if it would ever harm you. Okay, done with the gnat repellent. So these early mills were what was called a stick mill. They were very simple, some pieces of heavy timber, some pulleys and bearings, and they moved them from place to place. Hardly anybody moves a sawmill anymore. Like, we moved the sawmill onto a 100-acre tract, and that probably lasted 3-4 years,
Right.
at least. So they would stay there, go there every day, and they drug logs, cut trees and drug them into their little sawmill in the morning, eat lunch, and then they would sawmill those logs into lumber, grade lumber in the afternoon. Next day, same thing. So that's how that went on. Stick mills, even the Amish have more modern stuff than what we had. It was just a flat belt, a lever, a little carriage that moved past the saw, and everything was still kind of brute manpower. You rolled the logs on the carriage. We did buy a slab saw. A slab saw was hooked to the pulley here somehow, and it was automated. You laid a slab on this belt, and it was timed. The saw swung back, the slab advanced, and then the saw would swing, cut it off about 14 inches long or so, and it would do its own thing. So us boys would put the slabs on that belt. We could handle that. We made railroad ties, mine props, which were, in the zinc mines, they used something about 6 feet tall, just rough little poles, couldn't be over 6 inches and no less than 3, to shore up the mines, coal mines, zinc mines, grade lumber. A railroad tie back then was $5. That's what the sawmill guy got for a nice railroad tie. Today, they're $40+ dollars. Okay, Glenn was more established. He got back here and got into sawmilling right away. Our dads cut paper wood for 8 years, about.
Anyhow, yeah.
So then they got into sawmilling, and Glenn had already established some markets for his sawmill products. And some of those orders were open orders. He couldn't fill them all. There was more demand than what he could supply. So he asked our dads, hey, he would give us 2-3 trailer loads of 3x4s or something to cut. And he would truck them for them up Allentown area, somewhere that our dads were pretty local. Glenn was the reach out guy. And he got hooked up with the steel mills, Reading Railroad, Pennsylvania Railroad, Raymond White up here at East Waterford. He bought, I'd say, hundreds of trailer loads of lumber off Glenn and our dads. Glenn had bigger trucks and more people hired. George Baker came to our sawmill when us boys were like 8 or 10. He was a very nice man. He had let us play in Glenn's truck. Of course, the air horn. Young kid, everybody likes to blow the air horn. George said, go ahead, boys, blow that horn. He didn't care. Nice guy, though. Always liked George. Okay, that brings us up to about 1963. The three of them, they were working together, but not totally. Dad and Peter, and then Glenn had his. But they decided, the three of them together, it would be a better business. So they formed Rosenberry Brothers Lumber Company. And Glenn already owned the property down there below your ironworks where you're restoring, where the mill on the right, across from Balk's Saw Shop. Glenn owned that property. Did you say the Sixes sisters?
Sixes.
Sixes.
Sixest, I think.
I never heard of that name, but he bought it from them. And he said, most of our mills were up on the mountain, steep hills, wintertime was a problem. We wanted something pretty flat, near a major road. So that was the ticket. Glenn had the right property.
Plus you could get electric.
Yes, yes, electric was right there. So they set up a more modern stick mill, heavier and bigger, and added a debarker and a chipper. Slabs were a problem. They would pile up, they would cover you up. Not everybody burned wood much back then. That was for the poorer people. Everybody else used oil or coal. And of course that's changed. But so they must have did some research, and Gladfelder and Pulpwood, Gladfelder Paper Company in Spring Grove would pay for chips. They're about as big as a rice, what are they, wheat checks or something, 5/8 chip, and had to have the bark off though. Bark made ugly paper. Gladfelder made paper for Bibles and encyclopedias, so it could not have bark in it. And you needed debarker, and then it took the bark off, plus it cleaned up the logs. There was no mud, grit, sand from dragging them or rolling them around, so the sawyer, his saw stayed sharp way, way longer. He could saw way more without fouling it up. So, okay, we got into that. Stick mill, it had a log turner. Now, stick mill, the sawyer, there's a lever here that you set your thickness, and you manually pull this mechanism hundreds of times a day. There's a dog which holds the log. It's another 30-pound piece of spring-loaded stuff. The sawyer really gets a workout on those stick mills, and he turned every log on his leg, against his leg and his shoulder and arm. Well, this newer mill, we put a log turner in, had a lever here. You could make it go up, back, forward. Oh my, big improvement, big improvement. And we had a live deck, no more rolling logs. You pushed a button, brought up the next log off the debarker. Real, man, this is just, wow, unbelievable. So, but we still had to run diesel engines. The electric would only handle up to a 50 horse motor or 30.
Maybe even less at that
Not
time.
real big. We couldn't. So somebody contacted somebody, I don't know, but Valley Rural said, we're gonna update that substation and you can run any kind of electric motor you want. And those diesels, they were 100, I don't know what horse they were, but the batteries was dead. The water pump was leaking. Typical motor, a lot of maintenance, oil change. So we soon made the, 100 horse electric, boom, hit the button, zero, you're sawing wood. No cranking and jumping and all this. So the power company gave us all the juice we needed, and we put electric motors on everything. We had some big light bills. I mean, they weren't cheap, but in the long run, it was a good thing. Okay. We started out with one shift, and then that became 2 shifts. And then when us boys were out of school, and when I mean us boys, me, Denny, Gary, Greg, and later Gardner, we were the Sawmill shift on the 11 to 7 deal. And we were 13 to, 15?
Early teenagers.
But we could do men's work, pretty much. When us boys weren't in school, we were at the mill. We didn't play any organized sports. Gary and Greg might have, but Denny and I didn't. My dad thought that was wasted effort when he could be training his son to do mechanical stuff. So we learned an awful lot about equipment and sawmills, how leverage, all that goes with this. And we heard this phrase 1,000 times. There's always something to do around the sawmill. You know?
Sit down.
Yeah. What are you doing sitting down? There's always something to do around the sawmill. Okay. So it ran like that. We didn't run 3 shifts for what, 2-3 years in the summer. The 3rd shift didn't go when school started.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So let's bump ahead here to 1973. Our one sawyer quit, another one was old and couldn't run up. Oh, excuse me, I forgot a part. Somewhere in there, we upgraded this stick mill again. We put electronic set works on the carriage we had. That means the sawyer could now sit down like the modern mills and run this operation. No nice cab. We were out in the cold, the dust still, but you were sitting down like I am here now. You had foot pedal or two handfuls of levers. And so in 73, Denny and I, we both had just gotten married. He graduated from Penn State several years before and worked for a timber outfit a while. I worked for the business doing whatever. And then we got married, and they presented us that they needed a sawyer. So he and I ran the 2nd shift, 3:15 to 11:45, for a long time, 20-some years. We'd alternate. I'd do a night week, next week he would. Then Gardner came along and he jumped in there. So then we were on a 3-week rotation. And so in 1975, our mill was always, it was old. It was getting broke up. It wasn't on a good foundation. The old stick mill, the poles were rotting off and it was sinking and everything was just out of kilter. So in 1975, they hired Rockwell Construction out of Mercersburg to build a nice new metal building, concrete floors, sawdust drags under the floor level, all new stuff. Oh my. It was state of the art at the time. A brand new Frick sawmill. I hauled it from Waynesboro. They were made in Waynesboro. I hauled it on one of our trucks, and it was one of the last sawmills that Frick built. They quit making sawmills and got into industrial air conditioning more for whatever reason. There's a good many sawmill makers, and I guess they didn't have a big enough share of the market. So we were very happy with our sawmill. It was just like, wow. The floors weren't, it was all smooth concrete. Everything worked pretty well, a few bugs. Our dads, Glenn, Leonard, and Guy, I'll call them the old guys, each one of them had an area of responsibility that they were very good at. They had very few arguments. They of course saw each other every day, and they never had a real business meeting, very seldom. If we needed to buy a tract of timber, hey, there's 400 acres up here, we ought to see if we can buy that. What do you want to pay for it? This was all discussed over the hood of a pickup or sitting on a lumber pile, and well, you have to pay more than that or they won't sell it for them. Okay, so very quickly a decision was made, and probably Glenn tried to make the deal. Very few arguments on these car hood meetings, and they each had an area they were good in. Glenn was the office guy, deal maker, public relations. My dad was the logger. He ran a logging crew and made logging, trucking roads, and helped in other areas, and Denny's father was a sawmill guy. He just understood that so well. If something's a little wrong, put more lead in it. Oh, your carriage ain't lined up, the carriage ain't level. He just knew, and usually you fix it, yep, you're right. So they didn't, that's why they didn't have many arguments. They respected each other's judgment in each area. And if Pete said that was how to fix it, yep, okay. Or if Glenn said, that's a good buy, okay, buy it. So they trusted each other, and it really worked. It worked well. So for 30 years, it went on like that. Now, I don't want to make it sound like every day was perfect. It certainly wasn't. Anybody knows equipment or anything, that'd be a whole nother night's tales. There'd be times one area's broke down and just somebody walks up, hey, the chipper just burned all the belts off of it. What? You think, oh, you're about ready to just, why am I even here, you know, but, okay. So, Denny and I were in the mill area. I trucked some. Greg and Gary did a lot of the logging, and we had some hired subcontractor loggers. Also, Don Reesner, Jones Logging, Eagle Mountain, John or Bob Markey, Paul Danfelt over the mountain here, to name a few. Since about 65, we had our own inspection station. We decided it was too much dead time taking stuff to get a sticker on it. We hired a mechanic, got our own Pennsylvania inspection, so we inspected our own stuff, plus if we had time, anyone else's. The business was good. Everything seemed to be doing well. Ties, steel, and if one thing kind of fell down, something else would show up, and you just kind of kept on rolling. Veneer logs, you do something long enough, you get pretty good at it, or at least you should. So, okay, gonna move that. So this brings us up to about, and Gardner also, he, I did say that, he jumped in and helped us solve, and I don't know when Gardner came there. You remember a date? Maybe mid-80s?
I believe mid-80s.
One person that isn't here tonight, and a lot of you know her, is Gary's daughter, Stacy Rosenberry Brady. She worked there since '86 as our secretary. It's right out of high school. And I couldn't say enough about this girl. Not only was she a fantastic secretary and bookkeeper, she worked on a sawmill. If we didn't have enough guys to stack lumber, she'd come up and help put boards on the pile. Or she could load bark with a front end loader. What else did Stacy do? Jack of all trades. Yeah. And
she took the place of 2 off-bearers all one day. By herself.
And she didn't just run the office, she pulled steel out of people's fingers, put patches on a cut or a head or something, ran old people to the doctor, looked after everyone. I don't know how she did it, but too bad she's not here. Okay, around 2000, am I getting along here? Yeah, I know. Around 2000, age and health problems started arising for the old guys, and times were changing in the lumber industry. What always worked all those years, we were still doing the same thing, but didn't seem to be near the profit left anymore. And we wondered, what are we doing wrong here? Just, you get comfortable, and the old guys were still saying, I mean, we might have had some ideas, but they wanted it their way up until that point. So we didn't make as much money as we used to, or perform as expected. It seemed like the downturns lasted longer than the upturns. Didn't used to be that way. So us boys ran the business since about '02. Our fathers were failing. They signed over the ownership to us, and we had some debt piled up when we took it. The old guys made a few boo-boos, but we soldiered on, got that paid down, and we lived fine, good enough. It was great. So other things came along here. We're getting older. Equipment costs, labor, difficulties, expensive fuel. Our production was not where a more modern mill is. You know, some of them guys, they're cutting 30, 40,000 feet in 10 hours. We weren't cutting, what, Denny? Maybe 16?
Yeah, 16.
20 on a great day,
Yeah.
maybe. So there's a problem. So to upgrade, you're talking a couple million probably.
Yeah, a couple million for.
And here we are in our 60s, and I don't want to step into that. So we wrapped things up in March of 2019. That was the last log we sawed, and we had a public sale in June of that year, 19. We all had remarkable lives and life experiences that we will never forget. Lots of great Path Valley people worked for us, or sold us timber, or bought mulch, sawdust, or lumber from us. It's been a pleasure talking with you tonight, and thanks for your attention. Any questions, we'll do our best to answer them. And there is a video of our business. We made one about a year before we quit. It's on YouTube. You can all look at it. It's is it Rosenberry family?
I don't know how it's titled.
I don't know what it's worth. If you put Rosenberry Sawmill or something, it'll probably come up. But it's the fella that made it for us did a really nice job, and it'll probably be interesting to you.
I've seen it, it's really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched it too.
And Greg's in it, he's gone now, so. that's
Yes.